So today's lesson is an extension of last lesson. And today we want to understand what are the other sources of procurement regulations and legislatives. The other very important legislation is the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal of 2015. This law basically was implemented first in 2005 as a way of streamlining procurement processes because they realized most procurement was not done in an organized way. So the government of the day, through an act of parliament in 2005, decided to implement the Public Procurement Asset Disposal Act of 2005. This act had some issues, and that is why they came up with a review, which was implemented in 2015 to introduce some of the aspects that they felt were not in the first act. For example, the issue of the affirmative action was not in the other one, and it was introduced in the new act of 2015, and other important issues that were there. So Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act is an act of parliament that was enacted in 2015 for purposes of implementing some of the procurement processes that are very common in organizations. So when you look at the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, it is written in legal terms, and that is why sometimes it is very important to have the legal department in place so that they will help you interpret what the law says when you are in public procurement. And the act is divided into various sections, and each section talks about a very critical subject that is very important for people who are doing procurement and procurement practitioners. Then we're also looking at the act in form of, it is like a framework that you have to follow. And this framework provides a guide that must be followed if you are practicing procurement, mostly in the public sector or a public entity. What is a public entity? So this act also has simplified some of the basic definitions that you need to understand when dealing with public procurement. For example, we can talk about the various methods that are used in procurement, and we are saying this act has simplified and has said, for you to perform any procurement, you need to use the preferred procurement method. And the preferred procurement method we are saying is open tendering, because it gives each and every person an opportunity to be part and parcel of the procurement process. However, we have other alternative procurement methods that can be used in procuring goods, works, or services. So the Act has specified the alternative procurement methods that you can use. The Act has also simplified the rules and principles that guide people who are in public procurement. And at the same time, it has given various responsibilities to various individuals who are in line with procurement. For example, it has given responsibility of the accounting officer. What is the work of an accounting officer? And when you're saying about an accounting officer, we are saying this is the head of a procuring entity or a public entity. In simple terms, we are saying the accounting officer is the CEO, or in other organizations, they are called for example, in the ministries, they are called the principal secretaries. They used to be called the permanent secretaries. Then the Act also has given other committees that are very critical when doing your operations in public procurement. For example, in simple terms, we have 3 or 4 committees that can be organized by the accounting officer by the recommendation of the various departmental heads. One of the critical committee is normally referred to as the tender opening committee. So it has also given the responsibility of the tender committee. Then you have the other committee, which is the evaluation committee. What is the work of the evaluation committee? What are some of the people or the individuals or groups who are supposed to be in the tender committee? What is that evaluation process that you need to understand? The other critical committee that we also look at is the receiving and acceptance committee, or inspection and acceptance committee. Then the last committee that we have is the asset disposal committee. Then also, when you look at the government procurement, there are sometimes they procure services which are considered very critical in every organization. The Act has also summarized how you can deal with procurement of consultancy services. Not to forget, the Act has also summarized how you can dispose an asset and serviceable items within the organization. We need a disposal committee to do that, but you also need to identify which are some of the assets that you are going to dispose. And that is why we are saying before you dispose an asset, they have to sit down, the committee has to sit down and analyze what are we going to dispose for purposes of accountability and purposes of confirmation. We know some people are very cunning in organizations. They can decide to destroy an item for purposes of buying it, so that they just intentionally destroy the items, and many things that are in the Act. Then when you look at the Act, it is always supported by the regulation. And the regulation is just a simplification of the Act. Remember, we are saying the Act is written in legal terms, but the regulation is more simplified and you can easily read it and understand it. Currently, we have the regulation of 2022, which is on process. So they're trying to look at better ways of improving the procurement process within the organization. So this was a plus to procurement professionals because it created an organized way of dealing with procurement processes so that there is no victimization. We only follow what the law is saying when we want to procure for goods, works, and services. And that is why nowadays procurement is transformation of procurement and procurement system. So what is the purpose of the Act? I've summarized mostly the Act and what the Act entails or contains, but we also need to understand why do we have the Act in place and the regulation in place. So one of the purposes of the Act is to understand the procedure for procurement, the procedure for disposal, and the procedure for dealing with surplus stores and equipment within the organization. So that is the major objective of why the Act exists. However, we have other objectives that the Act needs to achieve. And one of the objectives is to maximize economy and efficiency. To maximize economy and efficiency. Remember, every time you walk into a supermarket, you hear people talking about economy. And economy in simple terms is getting value for your money. Remember, currently we are experiencing challenges as a country, and most organizations are trying their level best to maximize the little resources that they have. Therefore, every company is focusing on economy. And that is why we are saying, as much as you want to buy in organizations, you must get value for your money. And once you get value, you need to bring products on board that are going to make you and make your operations as efficient as possible. The other thing that is very critical is to promote competition and ensure competitors are treated fairly. Remember, we said earlier enough that you are not alone in the industry. This industry is very competitive. And remember, Everybody wants to be the best in the industry. And that is why we are saying as government or as the organization, we are saying, yes, we know everybody is competing. Therefore, we need to give each and every person an equal opportunity to compete, an equal platform to compete. Therefore, I said the best and only method that is recommended in public procurement is open tendering. Then information also is very important. So for people to compete fairly and squarely, you also need to ensure that you share the correct information and everybody is aware of their actions. Everybody is aware of what they are supposed to do. Ensure you provide the tender documents when they are needed. Ensure you communicate where they can get the tender documents and things like that, so that people don't feel that they are disadvantaged in any way. Then the other purpose of the Act is to promote integrity and fairness of the procedure. So here we are talking about integrity. And integrity in simple terms, we are saying, make sure that everything that you're doing in the organization is the right thing, regardless of who is looking at you. So integrity basically looks at how you do the processes and ensures that you do the process the correct way, regardless of your manager looking at you or your supervisor or anybody. Then the issue of fairness to the procedure, we talked about fairness. Treat everybody with a lot of fairness. Then the other issue of the Act is to increase transparency and accountability in the procedures. So long time they realized that we had some issues. Customers or suppliers were complaining on the procurement process. They were saying that the process is not fair, the process is not transparent, and that is why they implemented the Act for purposes of transparency and building public confidence in the procurement process. And that is why when you look at the Constitution and also some factions of the Act, it looks at public participation as a way of incorporating the public in opinions that are going to shape procurement procedures, both current and in the future. And the other thing that is very common is to facilitate the promotion of local industries and economic development. Remember, there has been some campaigns over the years, and we are saying as a government, or we are saying as the public sector, we need to incorporate local industry. So we are buying Kenya, we are building Kenya as a way of trying to empower some of these companies and contractors who are doing a good job at the end of the day. So the Act is justified to provide efficiency and effectiveness in public procurement and asset disposal system. And our main focus was the Vision 2030 and the development objectives that were implemented during the millennium, where they said we need to look at the millennium goals and the Vision 2030. So I don't know when we reach Vision 2030, we shall be talking about Vision 2050, or we shall have achieved our anticipation as a country in 2030. Then the other thing is to provide assurance to both foreign and local investors. Remember, for a country to grow, for a country to realize their dreams in terms of development and gross domestic product, they also need to incorporate both local and foreign investors. So the investors need to have confidence in the process, need to have confidence in the people who are handling the process, so that at any given time, we do not have cases of corruption that might affect the whole issue of procurement. This is because, you know, these guys are bringing money and this money must be accountable. So are they trusting the process? Therefore, the Act is giving them assurance that indeed your money is safe. Then the other thing is to provide for prudent utilization of scarce resources in public entity. So we are saying as the public sector, resources are limited. So we need to use the little resources we have to maximize some of these issues. We are saying that let's look at ways of avoiding waste when it comes to organizations. And that is why there has been a lot of campaigns over the years, and each and every government is saying, as much as we want to produce, as much as we want to consume, we need to be sustainable in what we do. And sustainability looks at the long-term effect. Are we going to continue surviving in the long term, or are we going to deplete our resources and we end up suffering as a country? And that is why different organizations are coming up with initiatives like plant more trees so that we become sustainable, use materials that are reusable or recyclable, and things like that for purposes of utilization of scarce resources. And there was a time NEMA banned paper bags. And one of the reasons was that we really need to reuse what we have. Because things like plastic, once you use them and you throw them away, you cannot recycle them. So the government decided to be sustainable in ensuring what we produce is something that is going to add to the issue of environmental protection. A good public procurement system will benefit both the public and the private sector in conducting business. So therefore, when we build confidence both in the service providers and the customer at large, we end up doing business and supporting some of these people to realize their dreams of empowering both the people who are working in those organizations and creating opportunities for future generations. So the Act has been streamlined in a way that it can empower both who are in the public sector and the private sector. And that is why we have an act that is called the PPP Act, the Public-Private Partnership Act of 2009, that incorporates the private sector in the public projects for purposes of participation in development of the country. So how then can you apply the Act? The Act can be applied in procurement planning. For procurement to succeed, remember we are saying procurement is a process that has to be followed. And for procurement to succeed, we must plan for that. And we are planning on the basis of, we are spreading our budget for a certain period of time. And normally it's 12 months. And along the way, we have supplementary budgets where we also plan maybe quarterly. We are planning semi-annually and annually. So planning is very, very critical. And if you don't plan to succeed, then it means you're planning to fail. Procurement, planning. So you're planning, once you plan, it is very easy even for finance to come up with a budget for the plan. And that is why at the end of every financial year, like right now we are going to close the year, the financial year, most departments have given their plans, individual plans as a department. And once those plans are in maybe in finance or the procurement, they will consolidate all those plans to come up with a big plan, which is known as the annual plan, the annual procurement plan. Then the other application for the Act is procurement processing. Procurement processing. Remember, we said procurement is a process, and this process starts with need identification. You must identify a need. And where do we get the need from? We get the need from the user department. And every department within the organization is a user in either one way or another. For example, if you are in marketing and you want maybe to do some marketing, you need something, and procurement will have to raise that for you. So you need to raise a requisition from marketing to procurement. And once the requisition is in procurement, then the procurement guys will start sourcing or looking for suppliers for that particular brand, and the process continues and continues. And the process ends with payment of suppliers. Then we're also looking at inventory and asset management. Remember, we are saying inventory is part of the working capital in any organization. And inventory supports very many aspects that are very important. Just a minute. The other source of laws that we are talking about is national public procurement and asset disposal policy. This policy has been there for a very long time. And basically, the essence of policies is like a guide. It is like a rule that you have to follow for you to succeed in most of what is happening in organization. And when you look at the policies, they cut across all the levels of the organization. Be it you're in management, be it you're in business or transactional level, or be it you're in operational level. At one point, you must adhere to the policies of the company or the policies of the organization. So policies are normally developed at the executive level, and they're taken downwards to the others who are in other departments for purposes of trying to streamline some of the activities that are happening within the organization. And when you look at policies, they apply both to procurement planning, procurement processing, contract management, inventory, and many other things within the organization, issues of compliance and enforcement of some of these policies. And what are the best mechanisms we can use as an organization to ensure that we implement some of these issues within the organization? So when you look at the procurement policies, what are some of the aims or the objectives that the policy needs to achieve? One of the objectives is to cure the challenge in public procurement and asset disposal system that contributes to the loss of government funds. So we are trying to streamline the disposal and procurement system for purposes of ensuring at the end of the day we do not lose funds. Look at the scandal of most of these organizations or public entities. The scandal of KEMSA, for example. That scandal could have been avoided from the onset. But because of negligence and arrogance and the governance issue, it went ahead, and the government is losing a lot of funds. And that is why the ministry in charge was very angry, and he ended up sacking even the board members of that parastatal. Then the other thing is to emphasize the need for strict compliance with the legal framework and guidelines and strengthen enforcement capacity. So we are looking at the legal framework, and we are saying we need to comply with this framework for purposes of ensuring at the end of the day, each member of this organization understands what the policy says, and they're able to implement the policies at departmental levels, which trickles way up to the national level. Then the other thing is to seal loopholes in procurement and asset disposal process, contract formation, management, and other processes. Remember, previously we had issues when it came to procurement and the disposal process. And that is why, through an act of parliament in 2005, they were able to come up with the act to support procurement practitioners in their job. Then we are saying to address ethical issues among persons involved in public procurement. I know there has been issues in many organizations because you find most people who are in procurement, they are in procurement or in supply chain by accident. So most of those people who are working in those departments are not actually qualified to do those jobs. And that is why we have a lot of problems when it comes to issues of procurement. Because when you ask a student today, why are you doing supply chain management? Some students might say, we are doing this course because we want to make a lot of money. But when they enter the industry, they realize these industries are a different ballgame. They're not going there because of passion or they want to make some changes, but they are going there because they are they heard rumors that in procurement you can be rich overnight. That is why they are trying their level best to do some short courses so that they can maneuver their way up and become professionals and end up defrauding the company. So maybe if I ask you some questions here today, why are you in supply chain management or procurement? Yes, John Mugo. Unmute to talk. All of you must answer this question. Yes. Joyce, can you hear me? Respond to the question. No, I need you to talk so that we can hear you. Eh? You know, others will be watching this video after we upload it on YouTube. Eh? So you need to be clear so that they can hear what you're saying, so that at least they know the purpose as to why you did this course. Yes, Joyce? Joyce? Yes, Mugo? I believe by the end of the course, you will at least have an answer as to why you joined procurement. It's okay. It's okay. So we are saying that we need to seal the loopholes in procurement. And that is a major challenge as to why some of these organizations end up failing to deliver to the public at large. Because there are a lot of loopholes in organizations that affect the whole procurement. And that is why when you look at the public, they always do not have confidence in what happens in most of these organizations. Because when you look at the issue of the 30% of all procurement to go to a certain category of people, you find that when you look at some of those companies that have been given those tenders, you wonder, is this guy a youth or a person living with disability or a woman? But that guy has been given a contract. So they don't trust the process. Then we are looking at ethical issues among persons involved in public procurement. This has also been a very big challenge, and the policy came to clarify what needs to be done in organization to ensure issues of ethical and morals in procurement process. So they decided also to come up with a code of conduct in procurement for purposes of sharing the code of conduct so that we understand what we need to do and what we don't need to do for us to remain afloat as an organization. Then the issue of record management also was a very big challenge. And that is why some years ago, you could find a document for a supplier getting lost just like that. And maybe it is a document that carried a huge amount of money, but because of the loopholes in the process, that document gets lost and you will never find it. So you wonder what really happened. So the policy came to address issues of record management. And nowadays, you find that it is very easy to do an audit trail in documentation because everything is in the system. So everything that you do must be entered in the e-procurement systems. And when you want those things in future, you can easily get them in the database or the IFMIS. We have a system called IFMIS, Integrated Financial Management Information System, that was developed by the government under the Ministry of Finance in those years. Then we're also talking about marginalized groups were integrated in the Act and the procurement policy. So this was a bigger challenge because they felt that they were left out and they felt they were treated unfairly. So the Act, together with the policies and the regulations, also included some of the marginalized groups. And this was a good initiative for the policy. Then you're also talking about to strengthen the delivery of goods, works, and services through giving direction on procurement planning and prudent inventory management. So delivery of goods, works, and services. It is very, very critical. And for effective delivery, they came up with a policy to support all those functionality. If you want to get the policy, you just go to the internet and you can be able to get a soft copy and read on the policy. So the other thing that is very critical, or the other source of law, is the Public Finance Management Act of 2012. This is an act of Parliament that was to be in finance department. Remember, procurement or supply chain works hand in hand with finance. So for purposes of supporting what the Act says, we have the Finance Management Act, which entails all the management of all processes associated with acquisition and deployment of financial resource, both in the short term and in the long term. So for us to succeed as the public entities, we need to implement the Public Finance Management Act. And the Constitution is also very clear on issues to do with finance. And that is why when you look at Chapter 12 of the Constitution, it talks about public finance. How are we managing the public finance? How are we managing the revenues we collect as a country through taxation? How do we do our expenditures? Are we wasting our expenditures? So we need to create a balance between the revenues that we collect and the expenditure that we collect, we spend at the end of the day, so that we do not have an over budget or an under budget. Public finance management in public procurement is a wide topic covering various aspects. And here we are looking at financial planning. So you need to plan for your finances in advance so that at least when the money comes, you are able to know how much you're going to spend and what goes to where, what are we supposed to set aside, and things like that. You also need to set mechanisms that will be able to ensure that we control what we do as a country in terms of the finances that we have, so that at the end of the day, we get the expected result and the actual results of the money that we've spent as a nation. Then the other thing that is very critical is the decision making in procurement and supply chain management. So every decision that we make counts, and we have to celebrate those decisions because the decisions are going to help us to become better and better in what we do. Choosing the right cost method is an essential step in achieving this objective. We have different costing methods that can be applied for those who are doing finance. I might not know some of these methods, but these methods go a long way in ensuring that we as a country or we as public entities, we are able to achieve the best and get the value for money. Then we also need to collaborate with other departments as finance team, because through collaboration, we are able to reduce costs. Through collaboration, we are able to make better decisions, and we are also being able to improve on the demand planning and increase the suppliers landscape. This is very, very important. And finally, we are able to reduce procurement cycle time. So what is the role of Public Finance Management Act in procurement? We are talking about maximize value for all stakeholders in the value chain. Remember, we have the value chain, which is very critical, and this value chain must include all stakeholders who benefit either directly or indirectly. And at the end of the day, we will maximize the value of those stakeholders. And at the same time, we will minimize cost in the value chain. This will lead to reduced supply chain risks. And when you talk about risk cuts across all the processes, regardless of where you stand in the organization. Every activity is risky in its own right. Therefore, organizations need to look at the aspect of risk and how best they can reduce the risk. They also need to improve procurement decision making. Very critical and very important. Then procurement and financing planning also is very critical. And the issue of expenditure, they need to set a limit of how much you need to use or how much you need to spend. And that is why when you look at the public procurement regulation, we have what is called the threshold matrix that sets the rule of the game, how much you need to spend in a particular method of procurement. Very important. Then the other source of laws or rules or legislation is the Supplier Practitioners Management Act of 2007. This was a game changer for those who are doing procurement. Remember, a long time ago, procurement was sandwiched in finance. So the people in finance were the ones who were doing all the procurement. So the government and other policymakers, they thought it wise that let us separate these activities so that procurement becomes independent, then finance also becomes independent. But when you walk into most organizations, they are still putting procurement under finance. And I don't think that is a good practice because all those activities are autonomous. They cannot relate in any way. So the Supply Management Act number 17 of 2007 was put into practice. And one of the issues that they saw it wise was to start training practitioners or procurement professionals. And they established what is called the Kenya Institute of Supply Management, which was a body corporate with perpetual existence. And this corporate was also it was considered an artificial person because in one way or another, it could sue or be sued in a court of law. The main focus was to train. The other focus was to register members into this body of professionals. And that is why now the KISM, for you to be a procurement professional, you must be registered as a professional. Currently, the Kenya Institute of Supply Management is doing good because at least it has penetrated and most people are aware of it. When you go into Twitter, you get a lot of marketing activities. When you go into maybe the internet, you'll always get them advertising their products. And that is a good step to the right direction. Then the issue of licensing also. Once you finish your professional course and maybe God blesses you and gives you a job, you'll be able to be registered as a practitioner in procurement. And you'll be given a practitioner's license or certificate for that matter. Then the other thing that was in these Supply Practitioners Management Act was to be able to examine professionals. And that is why they decided to come up with the Kenya Institute of Supply Examination Board for purposes of examining people. And at the end of the day, you will be given a certificate and you will be recognized as a professional with higher standing. So within the institute, also, they decided that it must compose of procurement and supply chain management professionals and a chairperson and 6 elected members to the institute. And last year or towards the first quarter of this year, they were having some elections and some members were selected. I think some of you are part of that process, and we are able to get new members to represent KISIM for the next 3 years. The chairman and 6 elected members of the institute. And we also had the Director General, who is a representative of Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, the Permanent Secretary under the Ministry of Finance, and they hold an office for 3 years, renewable ones, and perform various functions under Section 5 of the Public Procurement Management Practitioners Act. Then we had the Examination Board. And the Examination Board is composed of 5 supply chain management practitioners nominated by various councils or representation, where we have the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, KICD. Then we have the Kenya National Examination Council, KNEC, the Commission for University Education, KUA, Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, PPRA, Local University and Kenya Private Sector Alliance, KEPSA, and Secretary to the board is the examination officer who is responsible for the day-to-day activities of the board. And here we are talking about the CEO of KISEB. KISEB is located along Ngong Road. When you want to go there, you can always get their offices open from Monday to Friday from 8 to 5. So what is the function of KISEB? One of the functions is they prescribe a syllabus that we have to follow. So this course started in 2015. The first examination was done in 2015. And after every 5 years, we normally have a review for the syllabus. And the last review was done early last year. That was the first review that was done and the first exam for the first review. So after every 5 years, they look at the course, they try to reorganize and come up with better ideas and better courses for students who are doing supply chain management and procurement at large. They also conduct examination And this examination goes for, we have 3 sittings in a year. Yeah, 3 sittings in a year. The last sitting was last month. So after 3 months, also we have another sitting, and the last sitting is in December. They also make rules for examinations. And that is why when you go do your exam, they have sets of rules. Once you get your timetable, behind the timetable, we have a set of rules. Or authorities who sit exams, you have some set of rules that are there. They also prescribe examination fee payable. And remember, there are 3 levels, level 1, 2, and level 3. And every level has their own school fees. They were planning to implement the compulsory tuition for every student who is doing purchasing. So if that is the case, then you have an advantage, you have an upper advantage. Because it's not all about passing exams. You also need to understand what happens in the industry. And that is why when you look at people who are doing finance, they are way better than those who are doing procurement, because it is mandatory. At least you need to go to class once in a while, at least above 60%, so that you understand the concept, what is happening in the industry. And that is why today I want you to share with your fellow students. At least tell them to come and understand what happens, and they will become better and better every day. This is called continuous improvement. They also issue certificates, qualifying certificates. Once you finish this course, every level has its own certificate. And once you finish, there is a certificate of completion to ascertain that indeed you are a student and you completed all the 3 or 4 levels that were there before. The student's discipline also is very important. For you to succeed in life, you have to be disciplined. And discipline is very paramount when it comes to KISEM. Any form of cheating in exams, you become disqualified. And you might be suspended even for 2 to 3 years before you can go back and finish. Then they also remit the school fees to the Institute of Professional Development. Very important. What they collect, 30% goes for the development of the professional institute. Accreditation of institutions that carry out examination. When you go to the website of KISEM, they have a whole list of accredited institutions. And for them to accredit an institution, they also need to liaise with the Ministry of Education. So they come to your organization, they do some audits, they look at the environment in which the students are learning, and they can give you an accreditation certificate. They also promote what is called recognition of KISEM exam in foreign countries. And remember, before they started this course, they had to do some benchmark with various institutions across the globe, so that at least the issue of competitiveness was very key. So that once you get the certificate, it can be equivalent to something else in another country or across the globe. So how can you be disqualified, or you can be removed from the list? Number 1 is if you have been convicted of an offense involving fraud or dishonesty, you can be disqualified. Number 2, you have been convicted of any corruption activity under the Anti-Corruption Commission. And the other thing is the issues of bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is very common. Then if you have not attained the age of majority, and that is 18 years and above, you can also be disqualified. And you have not been convicted of any offense under the Act, that is the Supply Practitioners Management Act and the Public Procurement Asset Disposal Act. And lastly, if you have some medical conditions that can hinder you from performing your activities as normal. Then same reasons also apply to one, you can be removed from the register if you are bankrupt, if you have not qualified, or you have withdrawn from the body. Registration was obtained through fraudulent means. Some people like using shortcuts. They don't want to go to the process, so you can also be disqualified. You can also write to the registrar if you want to be removed. You can request through writing to the registrar. Then if a member dies also, you can also be removed from the register. And lastly, if you are convicted of any offense under the Act. The removal procedure basically is notification of removal from the register in writing. And this is published in the Gazette, where we have the name, we have the address and the qualification of the person. Then in case of reinstatement of the name is only by direction of the council or competent court of law. So you can also, they can return you to the register by the direction of the council. And here we are talking about the council members of the various authority or organization. The certificate of registration is surrendered to the registrar upon removal and suspension or death. So you need to return that certificate to the registrar. If the certificate is not surrendered, there's a fine of 5,000 that you need to pay. So one can also be suspended. One can also be suspended or removed from the name of the licensed person from the register. Number one, registration certificate ceases to be valid. So once you are removed on the register, your certificate will not be valid anymore. The name has been removed from the register, convicted of an offense punishable with imprisonment. So once you are removed, you can also be punished. You can go to jail for that matter, and other reasons that are also very critical. So what constitutes to misconduct? Those issues are self-explanatory. Failing to follow the professional standards. So if you don't follow the rules of the game, then that is misconduct. Misappropriation of funds or any property entrusted to you, that is an offense. Knowing procurement goods or works and services at inflated prices. If you know you are buying something at an inflated price, then that is an offense in its own way. Then we are also talking about failure to keep proper records of all transactions. Some people are so negligent. When you go to the office and you look at how they work, you really pity them because the tables are so full of papers and they might end up losing some documents or some transactions that are very critical, and that might be a case of misconduct. So disclosure of information acquired in course of duty without consent of the employer. So if you give information and the employer does not know, remember that is an offense. Remember the issues of confidentiality. You are not supposed to share any information, either in the organization or outside the organization with a stranger that you don't know. That is an offense in making. Involved in any corrupt practices, also that is a misconduct, and you can be taken to a court of law where you will have to defend yourself. We have some cases where some employees find themselves in hot soup. Somebody is earning 50,000, but that person has millions in their accounts. So you wonder, 50,000 and millions, you can't relate. Engage in any activities which are contrary to those which registrations and license certificate were obtained. So sometimes you end up having fake registration certificates and they don't match with what is in the system. That is a misconduct. Found guilty of fraud or any dishonesty act is a form of misconduct. and others. Those ones you can read them and you can understand. Offenses and penalties, those are just theories that you need to look at. And I believe they are self-explanatory and you can also read them. So what are the benefits of the Supply Practitioners Management Act of 2007? Number one is promotion of professionalism, discipline, and diligence in procurement, supply chain management. Professionalism is very, very key. Remember, what you're doing is a professional course. And for you, once you finish this, you'll be better and better, and you'll do your work in a more professional way. Protection of public, where, for example, issues of professional conduct is very, very important. So this act was there to help you to be better and better in your activities, and also as a way of maintaining what is called public confidence. Recognition of professionals also was one of the reasons as to why the act was implemented. Then we are talking about enhanced global recognition. Remember, we are a professional, and that is why when you look at procurement, it has shaped what happens globally. Look at the case of COVID-19 in 2020. The only professional that was working effectively was the field of supply chain management. So we are saying, for us to be recognized globally, we need to come up with some of these initiatives and qualifications, because we play a very big role, not only locally, but also globally. So impact of the regulation on public procurement. Much has been said about the impact of the Act, and the impact of the Act basically relates to the impact of the regulation. Maybe I can talk about the tendering procedure also. So the regulation has streamlined a lot of bureaucracy that used to be there in the tendering process. And the tendering process has been simplified in a way that nowadays it takes a very short time to open the tenders, register the tenders come up with minutes and go to the next step, which is evaluation. Very, very effective. And nowadays, because of technology, we have issues like e-tendering, which has made it very easy even to do tendering online. Then you can also do evaluation online and many other things. Then the other thing that is very common nowadays is the issue of trying to incorporate small, medium enterprises in public procurement process, so that they form part of the bigger picture of what happens in public entities. Then the other thing that is very, very important is the issue of awarding contracts that has been made very easy, and they have tried their level best to eliminate suppliers who cannot deliver by implementing what is called the most economic advantageous tender. So they are looking at the meat strategy, which is the most economical advantageous tender. Then also issues of audit trail and issues of accountability has also been improved along the way. So what are the importance of complying with procurement laws and regulations? It is very important for the practitioners to comply with what the law says and what the regulation says. And one of the reasons as why it is important is to increase stakeholders' satisfaction and confidence. So you have to increase the confidence of the stakeholders. And remember, stakeholders can either be within the organization or outside the organization. A typical example of stakeholders who are within the organization is the employees themselves, who are considered the human capital, the most important asset in an organization. Then we are looking at external stakeholders. For example, we can look at the shareholders, who are also very, very critical when it comes to issues to do with what the organization is doing. The suppliers and the service providers also form part of the external stakeholders. Then we are looking at issues like achieving value for money. And we are saying the regulation has enabled organizations to be able to achieve what is called value for money. Then we are saying it has also improved the organization's image and reputation. Remember, public procurement has been having issues for a very long time. There was lack of trust in the public sector. And because of the new implementations and the revision of some of these acts and regulations, we can now see the public confidence. And this has also led to image and reputation. It is very, very important to protect your image as an organization, because once we have negative publicity, then the organization is likely to fail a great deal. Then you're also looking at improves public relations. Is very, very important to increase the relations, public relations. And that is why it is very advisable to always share information every time, not the time that you feel that it is necessary. You need to share information to the public, and that is why it is a recommendation by government. Any public entity must publish their books of accounts in the local dailies so that each and every person is able to know and understand the financial position and the comprehensive incomes of these organizations or the cash flows. Increase a wider supplier base is also very important. Reduce procurement costs, very important. Improve operational efficiency, reduce corruption, increase transparency, and prevents fines. Objectives of regulations are still the same as those ones, or the objectives of public procurement. They are the same. So we have the types of public sector. The types of public sector. We have the central government, also referred to as the national government, which is very, very critical. And when you look at the national government, it is divided into three, where we have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And the legislature here, we are saying it is the parliament. Judiciary, we are saying it is the courts. And the executive is the government and the council of ministers. In central government, procurement is centralized at the top or at the procurement department. Mostly it is centralized. Then the other advantage of central government procurement is that increased pressure to achieve efficiency, savings in supply, increases efficiency of aggregation of requirement or collaborative bargaining. So you can easily bargain, and at the end of the day, you'll be given what is called discounts on economies of scale. Greater focus on status of acquisition is very, very important. And the greater focus on professional and career development in procurement, because your scope in procurement will be wider when you're dealing with a wider range of procurement products, therefore increasing your development and career. Greater participation of multifunctional contractual clauses, so you'll be able to focus more on different clauses and how best you can implement some of these clauses to become better and better in organization. Then we also have the county governments, and we have 47 counties in number, and each county has been given the mandate. And within the counties, we have the wards or the local authorities, and their main focus is to try as much as possible for them to coordinate procurement within the wards. Then it trickles down to the various sub-counties and later to the county at large. So procurement here is decentralized because every county is given the mandate to do their own procurement because of the local dynamics, because different counties have different needs and are in different geographical locations. So it has made it very easy for the local counties to do their procurement and develop the local contractors at the end of the day. So the benefits are more or less the same with the county, with the national government, but the only difference is that those responsibilities are geared towards the counties. For example, improved quality service, because every county is given an opportunity to procure their own, and at the end of the day, they are able to choose the best. And this will lead to sustainable partnerships with the local contractors. Then a mixed service delivery economy with easy access to diverse and competitive range of suppliers. So they're able to get more suppliers locally and build those suppliers along the way as they build the relationships and the collaborations among themselves. Then we also have issues of greater value of corporate purchasing strategy. So different counties come up with different strategies, and these strategies can be implemented as a way of increasing competitiveness within the counties. Then the other thing is the issue of community benefits. Because of county governments, we can see most counties are improving on their processes, they're improving on their structures and many other aspects of development. And this is a plus to most of the county government. Then issues of innovations and design, constructions and delivery can also be evidenced in these counties, making them better and better every day. And that is why we can see some counties coming up with the economic blocks so that they can do business amongst themselves as a way of building their portfolios. Then we have state agencies and corporations. These are also very important. These are organizations that are fully owned by the government of Kenya. And state agencies, we are talking about organizations like the KRA, the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Teacher Service Commission, and other commissions that were established. Then we also have state-owned enterprises that are also very, very important. And they are more or less the same as the state agencies. Then we also have agents like the KEMSA. Their work is to do some activity on behalf of the government. And a typical example is the Kenya Medical Supply Authority that have been given the authority to supply medicine to most of these organizations. That is the end of this great presentation. That is the end of this great presentation.